Hello again, it's Bronwen Logan here, and I've got with me today on Reiki Women Podcasts someone called Elise Brenner. Welcome, Elise.
Thank you, Bronwen. Lovely being here.
A beautiful woman's voice who's just written a book, so she's putting her voice right out there, which is excellent, and she's going to talk more about that later. But to start with, let's go with the question that Elise is going to answer. So the question was, as a woman, are there specific pressures you feel placed on you by society, by your family, or maybe yourself?
Thank you. It is a brilliant question. And I want to say that, International Women's Day was 2 days ago. And knowing the date, I went with this topic. And I want to say to everyone, I do not pretend to represent all women identified people. I am a white, urban, straight, cisgender woman over the age of 65 years old, and I live here on the land of the Massachusetts. So yes, to answer the question, absolutely. Our society has constructed and perpetuated gender norms and expectations for all of us. And the question, though, is about my gender, which I define as woman. And I would definitely say that these norms and expectations can be labeled as pressures. And some specific pressures I experienced, and please remember that I was born in the 1950s. Okay, so, right? And so the first one to me is a particularly nefarious message to women, which is, you're just not okay the way you are. And this can refer to one's skin, one's face, one's hair, one's body, one's behavior, one's speaking voice, the words you choose, the choices you make, your attitude, your moods, your values. And to me, in my anthropology scope, part of this is due to capitalism, because capitalism requires economic growth, and economic growth depends on people buying, and shopping. So the system of capitalism fuels wanting, it fuels needing, it fuels dissatisfaction, and it stirs up dissatisfaction with what we have, what we look like, what we sound like, what we feel like. And, the idea is that once we've, bought enough and changed ourselves enough, then maybe then women will be judged good enough. But I think the cost is very high because sometimes we're not even conscious of it. So that is the biggest pressure. And then I thought about, what is the society that I'm living in and have lived in reward women for, and what do they kind of punish or at least not reward women for? What is approved of and what is disapproved of. And I do still think that women are rewarded for finding a mate and having children. I think women are rewarded for success, but not too much, or else you're seen as selfish and manly and not nurturing and motherly. And the last big pressure to me is the pressure to please, to please and be agreeable, as in to please everybody else and be agreeable, right? Yeah. So those to me are the specific pressures I think maybe placed not just on me, but on many women. But like I said, I don't represent all women.
Thank you, Elise. That was excellent. And I've got lots of questions now. But before I go into that, I did forget to mention before that you teach medical anthropology in Boston, and you also run Brenner Reiki Healing. So if anyone's looking for you, that's where they'll find you. Now, I've got a couple of questions. So there's lots in what you just said. if we go back to the beginning, what would be, I loved what you said about capitalism. I mean, it's something we don't just immediately go, oh, that's what it is, right? But I can understand that link that you're making. So what then is the alternative? And I'm not saying you have to say you're a socialist or whatever, but is there a new order, or do you have an idea of a way forward?
Wow. Little old me gets to answer that question. Whoa. So I think you hear a lot of talk that I agree with about circular economies, right? Because, we're talking about an economic system. So in circular economies, they're meant to be sustainable, and they can be based on, anything that you take out of let's say the earth, or you make into a product, has to have either the ability to go back into the earth and then recirculate, like the way nature does, or if it's a product, it's made from things that are repurposed, or, for people, just regular people, going to a store that is a resale store, so that item, it was made once. That means any exploitative labor that was involved in it they were only exploited, right? A little less. Whatever damage to the environment and, transporting it from one place to another, it happened once. So somebody wore it or used it, then you wear it and use it. And that would be part of circular as well. So that sounds like it's going to be, wow, we have to go small. No, I think economists are talking about circular economies on a scale. It doesn't mean we all are going to live off the grid. I think that's pretty impossible now. When I got my training in anthropology, I started as an archaeologist, and we had to learn how to use stone tools, make them and use them. And it was hard. And, I know we're not going to go back to it, but if anything happens, you just come to me. I might not be able to fix your computer, but I can help you make a stone tool. And that goes for everyone out there, right?
Thank you for the offer.
That's my excuse to not embrace some of the technology that I find difficult, right? Because I got the stone tools now. I got and what could be more circular than that? Stone tools.
It's very interesting what you're saying. I actually was listening, and they were talking about America recently and food. And I'm a vegetarian, and they're making a lot of fake foods now, as such, like fake meats. Yeah, and they're using a cell of an animal, and then they're creating from that. They're actually creating pretend meat. Yeah. Oof. And it apparently tastes like meat. They've got the texture, they've got the whole thing happening. And I was wondering if I would do that, because it's still the cell of an animal. You were just saying you've got that.
It's still the cell of an animal, and it's food made in a lab.
Absolutely.
So I'm a vegetarian also, and I don't purchase or eat any of that stuff, that the fake meat. There's too many other great things that have been on this earth long enough that sustain people.
Isn't it interesting? And possibly it comes around to what you were saying about, our capitalist societies, and we're just so used to being able to have whatever we want, right? And this idea that we have to have meat. So just this is a slightly different thing, but it is that it's a part of that. It's that we have to have, if you go to I spent time in India, and the idea wasn't that people would always eat meat, that they would only eat meat when there was a special occasion or something like that, because it was special.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Where in our society
sorry. It's just so destructive to the animals and the environment. It's just not working anymore. It's one thing to be kind of a lean, mean hunter and gatherer using a spear that you made and literally putting your life on the line to go out after an animal to feed like quite a few people, versus a concentrated animal feeding lot that we see now.
Oh,
Or killing out the rainforest to ranch the McDonald's beef, it is beyond all. The global food system is just sick.
yeah.
And it's making people sick.
Yeah, and we are perpetuating that. So, that idea, we need to actually change our mindset, which is what you were saying before, I think, yes?
Well, it's all the ideas in our heads, yeah.
Yeah. So, looking at all of this stuff, how do you find the system of Reiki, has helped you navigate it and continue to navigate it, especially as a woman? Yeah.
Yes, unequivocally, the system of Reiki has allowed me to, as you said, navigate by, I would say, it doesn't matter what practice it is. We get more familiar with ourselves. And when we get more familiar with ourselves, we get more familiar with our conditionings, even those that are related to the societal level. So it's that stillness of all the practices that I can experience mindfulness of myself. I mean, how am I relating to these experiences? What is coming up for me in any given interaction, right? And with that mindfulness, wisdom comes up and we can gain some insight and explore. And, as a woman, and like as a human being, as a woman, I find out what I'm clinging to and how harmful that unnecessary clinging can be. So we might cling to, and someone who's over 65, if you're clinging to youthfulness in a society that, makes aging a crime and looking older a crime, then clinging to the old image, to an image of your youthful body is going to be harmful. And it could turn people to harmful measures that are, chemically or even surgical, and really just getting comfortable with who we are, the real self, that all these things like the aging and the youthful thing, that's a construct of the society. But as you said, it's about the mind. It's about, we then take that in. We take that in as if it's true. And so I think I know I've acted dishonestly, if you will say, and inauthentically for a lot of my life to keep up like the appearances of the societal conditionings. And so now age helps a lot to really get a handle on the soul, S-O-U-L, I might say, the soul self, beyond the roles, beyond the rules that are constructed by society. And it can only, I learned so much about the hara and anchoring the nervous system, and then being able to stand on this platform of courage and composure when experiencing gender-based pressures or anything else. And I think in particular, it's the fourth precept. I know the fourth precept can be anything. It goes everywhere, but be true to your way in your being. I've always said, and I think we wrote about it in our book, in order to be true, like Bronwen, in order for you to be true to your way in your being, don't you have to know your way, as in capital W, Tao? And don't you have to know your being? And that's the thing. In order to be true to our way in one being, we first have to know what it is. And as a woman, our way and our being may be what that person told me I had to be, and what the other person who I was pressured to please. So I could be a mature woman and I see a lot of women like this in my practice, they don't know who they are because they're who that person and that person told them they had to be. So yes, the fourth precept and gender-based pressures. Who am I underneath all of that? And can I discover that? And how liberatory that is for any being, any being.
Yeah. And I think, working as an anthropologist or having studied anthropology, that is a very driving question for you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So being true to your way as a woman. So do you think, and I'm talking here also as a professional, do you think that women are naturally nurturing? I think this is such a big question for women because I hear a lot of women talking about it. Yeah. And
so I think all human beings
mm-hmm.
have the potential
to
be nurturing and to be cold. I don't know what the opposite would be, not nurturing.
Yeah.
So I think everybody has the potential for anything.
Mm-hmm.
But then culture comes in, like you were just saying, anthropology, culture comes in and then steers us in a given direction in this society. But over here in this society, it steers us in another direction. And quite sure that it's not completely genetic, because there's the famous story of Margaret Mead going into Papua New Guinea and going along the Sepik River, and she meets, the Arapesh and the Mendugamor, and she's looking at sex roles, gender roles, we might say, and from one place to the river to the other to the river, here the women are aggressive and the men are meek and nurturing. And then over here, they're both about equally the same of everything. And over here, so, that's where she writes the book, Sex and Temperament. And, that it's formed. The potential is there for anything probably, but what the society will allow to be pulled out of you and what you are being asked to suppress in any given society. So there's a lot of societies, for example, that say to be a good human being, you share and you're generous. And I know in the US, if you share and you're generous, people think you're a sucker. They're like, we're hoarding shit all the time. Excuse me, but how big's your car and what do you got in your driveway? And how big's your bank account? We accumulate and then we aggrandize people who accumulate. You accumulate in traditional subsistence rural societies, and you're going to be looked at like there's something very wrong with you, and who knows what you've been monkeying with, with bad stuff to accumulate. That's the quickest way to go to any version of eternal punishment, So we have the potential to be either one, and so that's what I think. What do you think?
Yeah, I pretty much think the same as you, really. I think that we are created by our environments largely. Though I do think that not necessarily in the aligned with the nurture concept, but it does seem to me that when we're born into this world, although we have this sense of purity, we're all still quite unique and different. So that there is that aspect to that, but definitely that it is, especially for women, that we are, as you say, formed, to please, these are things that are pressures on us that shape us into who we are. I mean, I remember seeing, I was just talking recently about my mum. I remember as a kid, my mum would always sit on the sideline while it'd be like, oh, Dad, you go play with the kids, I'll be here, sort of thing. And she never played. Yeah. And I just thought that was normal for a woman. And this is the way I was brought up. Of course, everyone's families will be different, but I thought, oh, that's what a woman does. That's what a mother does. A mother sort of holds the fort and the others go off and have fun, you know? And so I did exactly that too. And then I could reflect as I got older, obviously reflect back upon that and think, oh, why did I do that? But I did it because I thought it was the right thing to do. However, if I hadn't had that experience, I certainly wouldn't have done that.
It's like once you have that family, fun is a little off limits. This is now your duty and your obligation. And, you know, there is that tiny piece you can't argue with about kind of like the biological imperative, which is lactation, you know, nursing.
Yeah.
That only can be one person that, you know, that's doing that. Yeah, I don't think that your mom's experience and your experience was at all wacky, you know, on its own weird thing. I think that is actually quite revealing of, you know, girls just want to have fun, but once you, right, you know, that's not right. But once you are, you know,
settled down,
then the fun is over.
Oh,
and if we see you frolicking and having fun while you're pushing, you know, the baby carriage, we think there's something wrong with you.
Yeah, it's interesting, right?
I think you're right. I don't think that's changed a lot.
What I think is that, you know, you talked about the potential that we have, and possibly if we come back to that, it just gives us a possibly a more positive spin on it. But, you know, this idea that we all have individually and as cultures have the potential to change and to be aware of the more awareness that we have. And that's where, for me, the system of Reiki comes in. Yeah. Bringing consciousness to my situation, using the precepts, whatever, to bring a greater awareness to what I'm doing. So the more that we as a society are more conscious, then we can take a hold of this potential and we can make change.
100% agree. And, you know, just to elevate one moment or amplify, there's the concept of critical consciousness that is on a different level. But I think that when you start expanding your awareness, critical consciousness is when you become conscious of like the system of capitalism, right? You become conscious that the structures and forces of society are often set up to harm and disadvantage populations of people who are not, like in the US, you would say, kind of a male white standard.
Yeah.
And anything that isn't that is already going to be marginalized and ridiculed. So some of the worst things you can say are like, you throw like a girl, right? So using gender to disparage a man because womanhood is always down one in patriarchal systems, right? And developing critical consciousness is equally as important as developing our mindfulness consciousness within ourselves, I think.
That's a really good point. Yeah, absolutely. I think we should finish on that. But before we do, I'd love to see your book. Hold her up.
I want to say that it's co-authored. So I'm going to show you me and Nancy Spatz. And then we can move to the title. Can you tell me if you can see that? It's in front of my
I can see Reiki. Let me have a look at the title under that. A self-practice to live in peace with the self and others. Beautiful.
What the world needs all the time, but now, you know, the horror, the anguish of what people are going through in Ukraine is something, you know, we can do our part, you know. So both kinds of consciousness and compassionate action come to play.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Elise. I loved
Thank you
it.
for the opportunity. I had a blast.
A bit of fun.
We have to have fun.
That's it. And yeah, look, thank you for everything. And I appreciate your wisdom. And I'm sure everybody who listens in will absolutely love listening to what you've just had to say.
Well,
thank you so much.
We'll find out.
All
Thank
right.
you for having me. It was so fun. You're the best. Mwah.